I'd like to get started with just establishing how important the Kirana, the Warung, the sari store, as they're called in the Philippines, are to the developing market ecosystem. Smita, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Visa. Thank you, Deal Street Asia. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to give a context, actually, the unorganized retail market in countries like US and UK comprises less than 10% of the total retail sales. But if you see most markets in Asia, that ratio is exactly the reverse. So in Indonesia, the 3.5 million Warungs comprise nearly 75% of the grocery sales. In Bangladesh, the 4.5 million Modi Dukan comprise 95% of grocery sales. In India, the 12 million Kirana stores comprise nearly 90% of the grocery sales. So really, these corner stores, mom and pop stores, they are the lifelines of the communities, and they are continuing to thrive alongside the big box and other retail, modern retail formats. Just in terms of giving some quantification, so globally, the mom and pop store market reached $900 billion in 2020, and it's expected to grow at an accelerated pace and reach $1.9 billion, $1.9 trillion by 2030. And a large part of this acceleration would actually come because of digitization. We at Flourish Ventures, we recently did some primary research in markets across 4 countries, which included India and Indonesia. And the research actually came back saying that 98% of the customers have said that they will continue to shop the same or more at the corner store. And 84% of the merchants said that they've already started using digital apps, most importantly, social media messaging apps for running their store operations. So, I think what we are talking about is that this is a very omnipresent, low-cost distribution channel that is existing. It's loved by the customers for the customer service and convenience that they offer. And there's a huge opportunity if they could embrace digitization and improve sales, grow their margins, and add to the economy, add to the GDP, add to employment. So that, I think, is the big opportunity. And this is an opportunity that's quite unique to Asia. Of the $900 billion number that I gave you for 2020, 72% is just India and Indonesia. So it's really big and it's really important.
Thank you. Arvind, any
initial firstly, thoughts? It's great to be here at Deal Street Asia. Thanks, Georgie and organizers, for such a wonderful event, and it's really nice to be on stage with Visa and Smita. I think, as Smita mentioned, I think the size of the market is massive. Like we mentioned, $1 trillion, and it accounts for 90% of retail trade today. The challenge, as all of us know, is it's actually inherently messy and fragmented. So if we try to unpack that, we're really talking about stores that are typically 500 square feet to 1,000 square feet. They support 2 or 3 families for their livelihood. They are probably covering about 400 shoppers in the neighborhood. Their margins are pretty low, actually. Generally speaking, it's about 10-15% versus the global benchmark index for grocery retail is about 35%. And yet they have been profitable always, as opposed to the big box retail and e-commerce, as we know, are kind of burning through billions of dollars of capital and still remain unprofitable. So I think the effort and focus for capital providers and tech startups is to really be able to unlock the value creation and, more importantly, I think create inclusive impact. I think that's where this category actually holds the most promise, and therefore I think the prospects going forward are immense in terms of being able to create those transformative outcomes.
Thanks. Actually, thank you so much for that evocative imagery, of a corner store who's supporting 400 families in the neighborhood. I think all of us who visited developing countries have shopped at least at one point from these stores. Smita, what are the pain points that these stores typically suffer from? Like, where does Kirana tech kind of become relevant as part of their lives for the corner store?
So typically, when you think of Kirana stores and when you think about solving for them, the most obvious answer is to help them sell better. But if you really unpack the store, there are three big kind of segments of what they are doing. They're buying and sourcing and inventory management. So that's one big box. Then you have the managing piece, which is really running the day-to-day operations, invoicing, all of that. And then you have the sell side, which is, demand generation, multi-channel, omni-channel presence. So if you are, again, going back to the research that Flourish did, we found that the biggest pain point is where they spend the maximum amount of time, and what they find very painful is really the buying side, the sourcing side. And the second biggest, in fact, well, almost equal, is the lack of access to finance. These two have come out in the research as the biggest issues. Most of these retailers, they end up engaging with anywhere between 50 to 100 different suppliers. And as Arvind pointed out, this is really one person show. This is a person who is buying, who's sourcing, who's shelving, who's accounting, who's selling. He or she is literally kind of running the entire thing on her own, potentially supported by one or two family members. So there is a lot of scope for efficiencies, for better price visibility, for better digitization. The other big challenge is that these stores, even though they are omnipresent, they are a very large chunk and a contributor to the GDP. They have largely remained informal and invisible, if I may use that word. Because of lack of verifiable data on their sales or profits, most formal banks, lenders, they've kind of ignored them completely. So there is, I think the opportunity to digitize them would change a lot of this. And I think that is where the real, crux lies in improving their, sourcing side problems. And as a result of that, then making sure that they have access to better capital and better access to working capital, which is the biggest need that they face.
Got it. Just deep diving on that, on the point you made in terms of supply side being a challenge. Do you not see demand side as a challenge, or do you think it's not something that you can solve using tech? What are your views on the demand side?
So demand side is a challenge. Ultimately, the proof of the pudding is that how much you sell and then therefore how much you earn out of it. Yeah. But it's kind of linked to the supply side. So for example, one of the questions in the research was that what do the customers want more from the corner store? So the customers want a more variety of SKUs to be present. Now, how do you get more variety? That's linked to the supply side. And so the supply side problems that the merchant faces is, for example, the smaller merchants, for them, the big issue is minimum order quantity. So they have to order a certain minimum threshold for the distributor to be interested in delivering the goods to them, or they have to go and spend 3 or 4 hours of their own time, shut the shop and go and pick up the goods. So all of those act as constraints, and then the biggest constraint is the working capital that they need to deploy to get that inventory. So all of that restricts their ability of what they can stock and therefore what they can sell. So if you have a B2B commerce app, which is actually doing doorstep delivery, offering them transparency on the pricing and not having an MOQ restriction, that actually completely changes the entire paradigm for this merchant, because you then have new products coming to their doorstep, which they can stock and sell, and they can actually generate new demand out of it. So that's how the entire cycle of demand is linked to supply.
Absolutely,
ultimately.
Absolutely. No, that's a great insight, actually. Arvind?
I wanted to pick up on something Smita said, and I think one of the ways to look at pain points is really first to step back and try and understand what the market's all about. Often there is a misconception that all small stores are similar. Actually, if we take India for an example, out of the 12 million stores, there are about 1 million who are class A and B stores, who are typically in your tier 1 cities. Their annual turnovers are anywhere from $100 to $200,000 a year. For those types of stores, actually, what you need to do is lead with tech first and not finance first, because typically they have solved their credit problem because they're fairly significant for their distributors who are in the city or who are in the region. And through those credit channels, they have kind of largely solved for it. What they need actually is tech that can help them with store management, actually improve footfall, improve customer engagement. For the others who are, the 10 or 11 million small stores who are in the, class C and D, typically in tier 2, tier 3 cities, their annual turnover is around $20,000 to $40,000. What they actually need is a finance first, kind of engagement, where for them, they need to solve for credit because they are typically at the bottom of the pyramid and it's very difficult for them to access credit. They will adopt tech. Typically, for a small store, tech adoption is a hard one. But for that segment, it would actually be, it would have to be that the cost of adopting the tech has to be extremely low. So I think the first point around pain points is really to make that differentiation. And if I were to take finance as the, kind of pain point that is one of the important ones to solve for, today, what's happening is that for the small stores who are typically in this class CD category, but only 15% of their credit is being, gap is actually being met. Today, most of the credit is being funneled through the distributors, the wholesalers, FMCGs to some extent, and then it's the informal credit segment. And I think there is some interesting kind of opportunities to actually tailor products that help both the distributor as well as the store. And if we take those two separately, I think we can look at a very good BNPL use case for the store. And I think the previous panelist spoke about the BNPL solution. There are a number of success stories in the region. We can talk about that. And at the distributor level, I think today a lot of FMCG brands provide up to 4 or 6% of their annual sales from that particular distributor in the form of credit. But that credit does not flow all the way down to the store. And again, now there are partnerships that are evolving where between the FI, between the FMCG and the distributor, there is a three-way partnership and there is some subventing that goes on between the FMCG brand and the FI in terms of being able to offer competitive credit to actually fund the whole inventory chain. We can unpack that as
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a great segue into the next topic in terms of, I think just wanted to summarize first, what are the pain points we've uncovered, right? So there's a supply side pain point, there's a managing the store pain point, which is typically for your class A, class B stores. There's a demand generation pain point, which I think, Smita, you're of the view that cannot happen independently. And then, of course, there's a credit pain point. Across these 4 pain points, any models, successful models that you would like to kind of talk about that you have seen in the region?
So, I think before I talk about the successful model, I want to talk about a couple of insights that I've got, having invested in a number of these companies and also, through actual conversations with some of these store owners. So one of the store owners, typically the store owners, they don't think in terms of profit and profit margins. They actually think in terms of cash flow. So what that means is for them, more than the profit margin, what is important is the velocity of sale. That is, if you have a fast-moving, low-margin product, that is better than a high-margin, slow-moving product. Because, if you have a fast-moving product, you can sell it and, generate cash and redeploy that cash. So that's a very important mindset to understand if you're wanting to solve for them and if you want to monetize from them. So it's all really about cash flow generation. The more you can help them generate cash flows, they are interested in solutions that can help them generate that. So there are models that are working on the B2B supply side, as I said, where they can cut down their time and frequency of their ordering cycle. And that actually directly contributes to their sales velocity. The other thing is, price transparency. Usually they don't get to see They are typically working with, dedicated distributors of different brands. So they don't get the visibility across brands. But when you have B2B commerce solutions that are giving you supply options across brands, there is transparency of pricing, there is better ordering that you can do, and it's kind of cutting down your entire cycle. And then on top of that, if you layer the entire BNPL, which is kind of buy now, pay later, it is actually a very, very effective model for them. So just in terms of why it makes sense for this merchant to do it, is if you have a credit product which is at 25% annual interest, and when you are charging that on a weekly basis, that actually translates to 0.5%. And if the margin that this person is making is 10% on that purchase, then adding that 0.5% is literally kind of a no-brainer. That makes a lot of sense for him to go ahead and order it on credit, pay that extra 0.5%, make sure that they are generating that extra cash flow, because if they didn't have that credit, they probably would not have ordered it. So that's how the economics works. And it's important that you can understand this whole mindset and this cash flow cycle of the merchant, and then kind of plug in solutions that cater to that.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to get your thoughts quickly on this whole supply chain model. I think it's a fairly well invested model at the moment, India, Southeast Asia, across the board. Any mistakes you've seen being made? Any best practices that you'd like to share in terms of the whole supply chain?
I think there's one context setting that I'd like to do, which is, if we go back to the Valley and in the early internet era, venture capital is backing pure play innovation risk. I think when it comes to Southeast Asia and India, again, and we are at the early stage of the internet era, I think in many of the markets, actually we're just getting started. Venture capital is actually backing not so much innovation risk, but actually execution risk. And execution risk is an understanding of the terrain. And no category that is harder to understand than the Kirana, Warung, Sari terrain. And therefore, that's where the rubber hits the road. And we are seeing in markets like India, where I think the category has been under beta testing for a number of years now. We haven't quite found the model that can be scalable and that delivers impact as well as margin. In the case of China, Alibaba had created a successful integrated offline-online logistics model. But in India and other markets, we're still kind of finding our way around. With that context having been set, I think there are a few ventures that I'm aware of who are, I think, beginning to gain traction. One is in Indonesia. Actually, there are two in Indonesia. One is Fairbank, which is an early venture in Indonesia. It's ADB Ventures backed, and they've been able to successfully create this whole virtuous cycle that I spoke about, where you have FMCG anchors, and you actually work with the distributors down to the merchants to be able to provide BNPL credit. It's typically a 7-day cycle, so actually the same line of credit gets turned over 3 or 4 times in a month, and they are serving something like 350,000 merchants. So that's one model I think that is proven. The other is Kiot Viet in Vietnam, where actually they are one of the few SaaS, kind of store management solutions that I have seen that actually has become, viable, and actually they are able to scale on that. So they are actually charging a SaaS $8 a month, subscription model for basic store management solutions, and they've connected that to both logistics as well as going online Shopify type of a model. And with that now, they're serving over 100,000 merchants. So that's another story. And the third one
actually,
is
just on that SaaS point.
Yeah, sure.
So I put this up on LinkedIn saying I'm moderating this panel, and I got 157 comments, and this was a couple of weeks ago. And most of those comments dealt with how the Kirana wala doesn't have the time for any of these products. I would love to get both your perspectives on this, that I don't have the time to deal with this, or they don't have the time to deal with this. One hand they're giving away, taking cash, one hand they're giving a product. It's a single person manned store. Technology doesn't have a place in a store like this. What are your thoughts?
So absolutely right. As we just described, this person is super busy because this person is literally like a superhuman doing everything. It's not like an enterprise that has different departments, specializing. So this person is completely, strained for time. But having said that, it's also true that if you give any solution that is saving time, they are not interested in paying for it. So that's the dichotomy. They are only interested, they're so focused and interested in generating their cash flow that anything else is a waste of money and a waste of resource. So yes, I think while they don't have time, but they are very, very clear as to how to optimize their time in generating maximum sales and revenue for themselves. I think they're very, very clued on of what works and what doesn't work. So efficiency building per se is not a priority unless it's resulting in better cash flow. I think that underlying message is very clear.
Sure.
And we have seen example, and let me give you one quick learning and insight. So, all of us in this room, we are so used to using the QWERTY keyboard whenever we are kind of typing. But to this segment, the QWERTY keyboard is actually an alien concept. So if you give them an app which expects them to type, and that too, it's not just type A, B, C, D, as it is to get into the habit of kind of writing and typing itself, and this is QWERTY, which is even the next level of kind of complexity, it doesn't work. So what actually, so if you have a UI UX which is designed from a B2C consumer focus, and if you try to give that to this merchant to work, it won't. And what Shop Up in Bangladesh did is that they actually used speech to text, so you can say rice and then it'll show up all the options, or you can even take a picture of your products, and if you it'll recognize the picture and then it will show up the options for you to order.
Sure.
So I think you have to understand the segment, design for them, and then it works.
Understood. And Arvind,
There's a couple of points, dimensions I want to add. I think one is very important is the trust deficit that exists today. So often business models have the small corner store at the end of the value chain. Actually, to make this work, the corner store has to be at the center of your business model. And I don't see that happening often. Yeah. And therefore, there is a trust deficit. The small store is not exactly ready to play ball because they're not sure what the motives of the new economy or the cool tech person are. And unfortunately, we've had some very large players in some of the markets in Southeast Asia and India who have gone in, with a scorched earth type of, approach and have created in the minds an evil captor, narrative with some of these, stores. And I think so. Therefore, it's very important for us to place them at the center and sit on their side. And if you are able to do that, you will begin to realize exactly the points that Smita was talking about. It's actually the Munna and the Bablu who have to operate the tech in the store. And for Munna and Bablu to operate, who don't have, who barely have a high school degree, you need to start with that as your UI, UX, and then build from there. So I think, with that ground level understanding, I think we will begin to see a better engagement model between the storekeeper and the
absolutely. Double clicking on the SaaS point you made from Vietnam and just taking on, Smita's point of them not paying for efficiency. What is that one learning from this company that they did differently, which can likely, apply to other markets as well? Why are they willing to pay for efficiency, or are they not paying for efficiency and paying for something else? Is there something to learn for us there?
I mean, I've had some opportunity to advise Create at an early stage of their venture. Yeah. I think what they did very well was to have a very deep understanding of who their customer was. And what they did do is they did not go to any one particular sector like grocery, etc. They actually opened it up to multiple sectors: electronics, apparel, flowers. In fact, I think florists are one of the biggest categories, if I'm not mistaken. And that was one. Second is they made the solution so easy to use, and actually it was literally for a few cents a day, you could onboard yourself onto it. And I think, and then with that, they were able to then create trust. And with that trust, they were able to then say, okay, we will actually help you save on delivery because we know some of your customers want neighborhood delivery, so we'll bring logistics in.
Got it.
And then add payments in, and then add credit in, which they are, kind of scaling through. So I think that's...
Sure. So it wasn't a pure efficiency play. Yep. It was kind of like a demand generation, logistics, like an entire ecosystem play. Great. I think question number one actually is a great segue into the next topic, which is the biggest criticism leveled against Kirana Tech usually is that, where is the monetization opportunity? Just reading out question 1, how do Warung Kirana Tech startups make profits given that FMCG margins are very thin? I think very valid question. All of us in the industry do know that margins are very thin. Smita, your thoughts on where the profit pools lie?
I can answer, but Visa, you yourself have been part of this industry. You were with Grofers, you run this business. So would you want to take a stab at it first and then?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think from my perspective, really where the margins kick in is from a retail store perspective, he has 20, 30 suppliers coming to him, right? With a variation of about 100 sales boys visiting him at any given point in time. Transparency is what brings in the margin play here, right? So he has very little understanding of what is selling in his store. He's not the master of that. The sales agent is essentially coming and dumping products that they think the stores should sell. That's number one. The second thing is essentially that the minute you have people visiting your store at such a high frequency and you don't understand what is selling, you don't know what to order either. So the margin play really comes in terms of where there is transparency and there is logistical efficiency built into a tech ecosystem. I worked with distributors, mom and pop distributors in the past, and their logistics fleets are not optimized for deliveries. Capacity utilization is a mathematical problem that they don't typically like solving. Tech companies are enabled to kind of solve these problems. So that's kind of where the margin profile comes in. And of course, when you add on credit to it, the margin profile increases. So I think this is a bit of a misconception that margins don't exist in the FMCG ecosystem. In fact, the distributor is one of the most profitable people in the Indian SME ecosystem. If they put in $100 at the beginning of the year, they get about $126 back at the end of it. I'm not sure how many of our businesses actually are able to say that. So the distribution ecosystem is actually highly profitable if you turn capital frequently enough. And that's the play really here is to mirror that, but again, enable that from a tech perspective. That's my...
I think that's a great point. And just to add one more dimension to it, I think the other dimension is the SKU mix. So there is a combination of different SKUs that you need to balance. So you will have the staples, for example, which will be very, very thin margin, but high volume. So you will sell a lot and they're very fast moving, but the margins will be very thin. And then you'll have the other more exotic products, if you will, the beauty products or the personal care, which will sell slowly but will have higher margins. And I think, managing that mix that you can actually sell high volume as well as some of these, more profitable products, and make sure that your shelf space is kind of organized in a way that you can sell the SKU mix that gives you the best profitability. I think that becomes important. And for that, the point that you made is important. You should have the insights of what sells when and how, and make sure that your supply chain and the ordering is in sync with that, so that you're kind of optimizing your capital, but at the same time, you're also balancing value versus margins.
I wanted to give one example about the insights and data that you spoke about. I did see in one instance an application of data analytics. I was advising a company called SnapBiz in India. They're a small startup who are serving about 50,000 merchants. And so the challenge for FMCG brands was they know the sell-in, they don't know the sell-out. So what they did was obviously go and digitize the inventory and then put it on the cloud. And what that then did was to close the loop with the FMCG brand so that they could actually then see what's moving in the store and then be able to push assortment and help the store owner actually optimize their product shelf. But beyond that, there was an interesting application. The company actually installed an LED screen at the back of the store owners where he sat at the cash desk because it was realized that the in-store brand promos are irrelevant in a store because there's a wooden counter and often shoppers don't go into the store to actually shop. They stand outside. So that same data and insights was piped into an LED screen that sat on the back of the store owner, and now brands could actually do hyper-local advertising on that LED screen, which could actually talk to the neighborhood shoppers for that location in terms of bundling, an Ashirwad atta with some oats product. They could actually create bundles which spoke hyper-locally, and I think that's the kind of path where you can actually begin to create data services and insights that actually begin to deliver monetization for the store owner, because he starts earnings, actually becomes an advertising real estate landlord for that LED screen that sits behind and begins to earn income from there.
Great. I think before we get to the other questions, where does Kirana Tech go from here? I think we've discussed interesting supply chain models. Managing inventory, selling might not be super relevant. Interesting credit models emerging in Indonesia and India. Where does this go next?
I think the big opportunity is really to kind of, riding on top of this formalization and digitization. The embedded finance is the biggest opportunity, because across markets, credit to these stores is really, really minimal. And the power of that credit fueling that growth is quite phenomenal. As soon as you start to see digitization happening, and you see digitization in different forms. So if you are actually ordering from a B2B app, you see the trail of what you've ordered. If you start accepting digital payments through QR code, you then start to get visibility of your sales. And on top of that, if you start having working capital being given, that's a big opportunity. B2B payments, there's a lot of focus that has happened on the consumer to merchant payment, and that itself is an opportunity, get QR codes for everyone and start accepting digital payments. But the bigger pool is really the B2B payments. That is the payments that these merchants are making to their suppliers. Most of that is in cash. And, digitizing that, and the cycle that it takes for that cash to be in the system and for it to kind of be available once again is a really long cycle. So B2B payments is a really big opportunity. So I think we have just about gotten started in terms of what is possible. There is recognition that this is a big area that needs to be worked. And I think, the stacking up of these different solutions is really what the future looks like. And I would want to believe that while there's been a lot of focus on e-commerce, I think in Asia, in countries like India, Indonesia, the future is combined commerce.
Understood.
I think like I mentioned, we have been in this category under the beta testing for long.
Yeah.
And I think where we are going is, and my own personal opinion is that I think the unlocking of value will happen on the supply side, relative to the demand side. And I think that's how we're going to see this play out. We've had quick commerce come in and create some ripples where there are 15-minute delivery models that are, creating some what I call noise in the system. But I think that will recede in my view, because it's it's capital intensive, and it's during the pandemic maybe there was an urgency for for quick deliveries. I don't think that exists anymore. And I think what will define our category going forward is, in the macro environment where we are going ahead, I think growth over profit models are no longer in favor, because the era of cheap money is over. So I think an absolute detailed understanding, grounds up, and working through the execution challenges, actually able to build something that truly embraces the storekeeper and brings the best of the ecosystem around them, I think is really going to be the factor that will separate the winning bets from the others.
Absolutely. But very optimistic about Kirana Tech in just simplistic yes and no?
Yes, absolutely.
Smita?
Absolutely, yes. And I think the big order, apart from, making this store better, there are also opportunities for making this store the hub of many other aggregated services that we are already seeing. So remittances, bill payments, and then they start actually becoming distributors of a whole range of other services as well.
Absolutely.
I think one, kind of tailwind that this category will receive is from governments and regulators, because they sit squarely in that inclusive impact category, and therefore we're going to see that come through. Some of it will be a challenge to this category, because in India, as we are seeing the start of the ONDC, and the ONDC aims to be an interoperable, decentralized platform to connect buyers and sellers. It will take some time to actually reach tipping point, but we could see those things kind of both adding kind of tailwind as well as some challenges, and we need to build taking all of that into account.
Absolutely.
I would want to just add one word of caution in terms of there is no playbook already established for Kirana tech. First of all, it has to be nuanced market by market. And it's a very fragmented market. So as he rightly said, there is a whole lot of execution risk and understanding the customer and designing for the customer risk. So if you do that well, the opportunity to be tapped is still very, very significant.
Sure. I'm going to double click on that because we have a question on exactly this. What are the differences between micro retail or digitization landscape in India and Indonesia? Any examples that you've seen that work well in India, may not work well in Indonesia? Arvind, Smita, open to both of you since both of you advise and invest across jurisdictions.
I had the opportunity to live and work in Indonesia, and I think in some sense the question following that also is related.
That's true.
It talks about Indian founders operating in Indonesia. So I did have the chance in my previous life as an operator to live and work in Indonesia, and I think there are a number of things that are similar. For the time that I lived and worked there, I think the cultures, there's a lot of cultural kind of resonance, and I think the whole affordability rules everything, and therefore creating micro-sized propositions, I think also are similar. Execution risks are very similar. There's concentration of population, and the urbanization that actually creates challenges. I think that a lot of the tech that we are building in India actually can work in Indonesia. I think the difference really is in the market infrastructure. I think India has the national market infrastructure that's been built over the last 5-7 years. Indonesia is only going towards that, where a lot of the infrastructure is still not there. Open finance is something that the regulators have stated forcefully, but we've not seen all the manifestation of that. So I think it's really the infrastructure that's the missing piece. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of kind of portability between the two markets.
I was going to say the same thing. I think what I've noticed that in India, especially because of UPI, payments have become entirely, not entirely, but to a large extent online. And the minute that happens, it's easy to kind of build in credit into the market. Whereas in Indonesia is still kind of on the curve of having cash payments moving to digital payments. So I think that's one big difference, which I think impacts the digitization landscape in my view. Any other thoughts? Final thoughts?
There is also the logistics difference, in Indonesia, with its multiple islands and kind of spread. There is very clearly a Jakarta and the rest of the Indonesia, or a Java and the rest of Indonesia challenge that needs to be solved. So if there is big opportunity in going, all out and catering to the remote markets. In fact, that's a big value addition to the brands also who do not have such a deep penetration in some of the remote markets in Indonesia. And there is therefore that margin that can be made by making that supply chain more efficient.
Absolutely. Great. I think we're just on time. Thank you so much for attending this. I had a great time moderating. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Smita, for sharing your thoughts. This was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Visa.